Okay, Craig, welcome to Nova Scribes. It's great to have you. Tell us about immunity to change.
Thank you very much, Brian. And thank you for the introduction and the opportunity. Uh, as I raise my hand, this is my first time with Nova Scribes, and I had the opportunity once to work with Brian and see him in his full capacity as a facilitator and as a graphic facilitator. And one of the things that I will not be bringing to you all tonight is my artistic capabilities. Um, so hate to disappoint anybody that was going to have any ideas around that for tonight, but hopefully we'll tease you with some other stuff that will pique your interest. Um, before we begin, um, we were doing some. I was just checking in to kind of see where people were calling in from, and I think Lisa and then Lisa Rothstein had joined, and so Lisa Rothstein, where are you calling in from?
Are you asking me to say that or put it in the chat?
No, just say where you're calling in
I'm in
from.
San Diego.
Okay, nice to meet you. And then Lisa, without any last name.
I'm actually calling from New Zealand.
Ah,
So hello
two.
from
Okay.
tomorrow.
Another tomorrow. Nice to meet you. And we have Dawn. I'm familiar with Dawn. Dawn, where are you calling in from though?
Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
Upper Marlboro. Nice to see you again, Dawn.
You too.
And then we have Michelle.
Hey everyone, calling in from Washington, D.C.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Michelle. So again, my name is Craig Kullmann. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And one of my goals, and we'll get into this a little bit, is really to kind of give you guys some exposure to the framework immunity to change. And so I can't see everybody at the same time. But who here has raised your hand? Who here has heard of or used immunity to change? Okay, a little bit. Okay, so we have some people who are going to be familiar and other people who are not. And so this is really going to be more of a teaser. So for those of you who might work as facilitators and coaches, you can use you can use this framework and tool at the individual level, or as Brian was saying, with group dynamics. And this is going to be something I think where if you're working with a group over a period of time, is that where it's going to be most useful. As far as like a one-off type of thing, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It's going to require, if this is something that you're really interested in, it's going to require to sort of do some further reading again. So because this is just more of a teaser to kind of see how you respond to this. And before I get too far, so the purpose is for tonight is really just to learn about the framework and to try to put it into practice, even as brief as the amount of time that we'll have together. For me, the objectives are for you to leave a little bit inspired about it. And then by the end of the night, you'll have applied it to your own personal goal. This will give you a taste of what this is like if you haven't used it before. And then just to know, what are some of the basic concepts. So again, I'm not going to be able to take you through, we're not going to have the time to go through everything, but at least hopefully you'll walk away with your interest peaks, okay? And because the framework requires, I think the benefit you get out of the framework is when you share and when you tend to be vulnerable. And so we have some principles and agreements, and I would say, I'd ask everybody to, to be as present as possible, be curious. And, if your cup is already full, given sort of the state of the world, and you don't feel like sharing or going too deep, that's fine. You go as far as you want to go. But if you feel like you want to sort of really get into the framework as much as you can, then I would encourage you to, to feel vulnerable and take risks in that space. Hold judgment, listen to others. And what I'm trying to do here is create a holding environment for this group so that we can practice this. So again, I would ask you to respect confidentiality and sort of, what people share with you in your breakout room, you keep that to yourself. And, if you just don't feel like sharing, you can talk about the weather or, the latest sports event in your area or whatever you want. But those would be the principles and agreements that I would ask us to adhere to. So with that, I came across as Brian was saying, I came across the immunity to change framework when I was studying the adaptive leadership framework, which was developed by Ronald Heiftez at Harvard University. And so the adaptive leadership framework, actually the immunity to change framework, kind of actually draws upon the adaptive leadership framework, but they're distinct, but there's some overlap there. And the thing I love about the immunity to change framework is that I think can be a very practical tool to have in one's toolbox for the reasons I was saying before, if you're working at an individual coach level, one-on-one or with group dynamics. I think it can be a very powerful tool to move people from the head space into the heart space and try to figure out, why are people stuck? Why is this group of people or individual, not making the advancements that they want to make against a group goal or a personal goal? And so in full transparency, I come to this space learning like you are. So I am not an expert in the immunity to change, but as a facilitator, I'm seeking opportunities to, apply it, use it, pilot it, see how people respond to it. What are the feedback? How do people react to it? So I will do my best to answer questions as we go through it, but I can't guarantee that I will be able to answer all questions. So just wanted to put that out there. So the framework, it was developed by two people, Lisa Kagan or Lisa Lahey and Robert Kegan. And so they're developmental psychologists. And so their research is really focused on understanding how adults learn and why individuals and organizations struggle to implement meaningful change. And Brian, before I go too far, like if someone raises their hand and I don't see them, just please chime in and let me know, because I have multiple things on my screen.
No problem, Craig.
So I think the immunity to change framework is one way to help us explore kind of what's going on, in our minds, and also how that's connected to our sort of emotional state as well. And so given today's environment, when there's so much change happening at a really rapid pace, and then we see people sort of resisting sort of these changes, at least here, I can speak for many people in the US, like a lot of policy change at the government level, then people are sort of resisting this in different spaces. Not everybody, but there are groups, and factions that are resisting this. We often have a term, we say, well, people are resisting change, right? But if I were to give each of you a mega ball lottery ticket tonight, and tomorrow you wake up and you realize that you just won $1 million, I highly doubt that you're going to turn to me tomorrow and say, Craig, I don't want that ticket, right? That's going to be a change that you're going to most likely welcome and run with. And so when we talk about change, what we often say is people don't resist change, but they resist loss, right? And so they resist the loss of the things that are precious to them: stability, identity, belonging, right? And so that is something that I think, just to kind of, as we go through this, to kind of, keep in mind. And that's like when we talk about adaptive challenges, oftentimes it's about getting people and moving, shifting mindsets around grappling with, loss. And so what Kagan and Lahey would say is that people resist this feeling that, we are without defenses in the presence of what we see as danger. And so that causes anxiety. And that, our anxiety management systems help us survive, and they do serve us very well. But at the same time, they like create these blind spots. And so they can really actually prevent us from new learning, right? And they constrain what we're able to do as we move forward in our lives. And we're trying to sort of, make improvements, again, whether at the individual level or at the collective level. And so what Kagan and Lahey show us is that our anxiety management systems are in effect, there are behavioral immune systems. And that's where they came up though with this analogy of this immunity to change. And so we'll get into this and and discuss further. But they say is like our immune systems, they give us this relief from anxiety, and then but while creating a false belief that many things are impossible to do, when in fact they are possible to do. So that's the context of sort of the immunity change, and then we're going to delve into the framework. But before we do, does anybody have any questions that they want to raise right now?
And you can go off
Again,
mute or type your idea in chat, whatever works best for you. I think we're good, Craig.
Okay. So raise your hand if you've used liberating structures. Okay. Who of you who've used liberating structures have also used TRIZ, the structure TRIZ? I can't, if there's any hands, let me know, Brian.
Yeah, I got Wade. Looks like he's used it.
Okay.
Wade, that's a big
Okay.
red teaming thing, isn't it?
Okay. So for those of you who've used TRIZ is a modality to sort of to highlight what are behaviors that a group is doing that's working against them from making change. And so in generically speaking, TRIZ would say like, what is, like what's really important to you, or what's important to this group, what's your goal? And then you'd make a list of everything, like make a list of everything you would do to ensure that you fail at achieving this goal. Right. And so you go to extreme, like have a lot of fun with it. You list out all the crazy things that you could do to ensure that you fail. And then it goes on to ask you, well, what are the things that you actually are doing that are similar to this list of, crazy behaviors? And at that point, it causes people to say, oh, well, yeah, maybe we actually, we are doing this. And you begin to bring things to light a little bit. But then in TRIZ, what happens then is then you immediately jump to like, okay, what are the solutions? What are we going to do to sort of stop these behaviors? And that's where you begin to depart from sort of the immunity to change, where TRIZ is kind of stays at the superficial level of, and you hold up a mirror and say like, oh yeah, what's going on here? But you don't explore why those behaviors that are working against you are there. And I think, so if you do use TRIZ in the future, I think as we go through this, you'll probably begin to see this distinction. And I think, while TRIZ can do a good job of maybe like highlighting some things of behaviors that are working against you, it's not going to really allow you to sort of get to a deeper root causes of what's actually going on. And so that's where I think, again, this tool can be very powerful. So let's, in the chat, I would like you to go to the chat, and there should be a link there that I would like you to click on. And I want you to download that, Google Doc. So I don't want you to type into the Google Doc in the link. Otherwise, everybody will be typing into it. But I would like you to take a minute and download that link, so you have it on your computer, because this is what you're going to use for the rest of the evening. Okay. So just give me a thumbs up when you guys have that downloaded, or if you have any problems downloading it.
Craig, are we going to be working in this document or do you want us to make a copy?
I want you to download it and make a copy. I don't want you to be working individually in the link itself.
Yeah. If you go to share and then make a copy, that's one way to get there.
Just let me know when you guys are good to go. You should see this, what I have on my screen, you should see 4 columns. Everybody good?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, Lisa corrected me. It's file and then make a copy.
Okay. Okay, so the way this is going to work is that I'm going to take you through this process. I will use my own case to guide you, but you yourselves will be the case in point, right? So you are going to go through this and do your own reflection, and then see how this works for you, and then after this, then we'll do we'll try to get on the balcony and kind of do some debriefing. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you guys to do in the sheet that you downloaded is I want you to think about a personal improvement goal or a personal commitment, change that you want to make in your life, whether it's in your personal life or in your professional life. Okay. And I want you to think about a couple of criteria, because this part is important to get the most out of the framework. Because if the personal commitment or the improvement goal is kind of meh, the rest of the process isn't going to work. So as you think, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do some self-reflection. And as you do it, I want you to think about, I want this to be something that you have control over, right? This is something that you control, your own behavior. And it's not about changing others, right? This is about something that you want to change about yourself. Okay. So that this is important to you. It would be a big deal for you if you could get dramatically better at it. Okay. And it's not nice to have, but like you really feel like you need to get better at this, whatever it is for you. And maybe most importantly, others would value it if you could get better at it. So it's not just important to you, but others, whether your colleagues, your boss, your family, they would really value it if you could make a particular change or an improvement. Okay. And then the last thing is like thinking about like on a scale of 1 to 5, really the importance should be a 4 to 5. Okay. Is that clear? So again, this isn't about any other people. This is about your reflection, about your own personal commitment or a personal goal that you want to make, an improvement goal that you think will make your life dramatically better in your personal or professional life. Okay. And so, I'll give you an example. So like for me, at the family level, so one of the things that as I've gone through this framework and tried to apply it to myself, is one of the things that I identified is that I want to and need to be better at directly answering questions that people, particularly my family, ask me, right? And then also being present when I'm being asked a question. So that's the behavior that I've identified, that if I could be better at this, the people in my life would be much happier. And they would really appreciate it if I would make this change. So that's kind of the level. And again, it could be in the personal or professional setting. but that's just to give you an example of what type of improvement we're talking about. Okay. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and I'm just going to put some music on, and so I'll let you guys sort of just reflect on that, and you can try to fill that in your sheet. All right. This let's move this forward. And so again, when I went through this, when I said like to be better at directly answering, questions that people ask me and not sort of respond in an indirect way, and being present when when I'm being asked a question. So for me, like I hit all of those criteria because it would matter to me a lot, and it would cause less conflict in my own personal setting, and it would make everybody, including me, happier. So before we move on to the next column out of our 4 columns, is there anybody that feels would like to share? No pressure. If you don't, that's totally fine. But if there's anybody that would like to share anything that they would like to work on or feel it's important to improve in their personal or professional situation.
And I think you could just come off mute and speak to it. Wade.
Wade?
I have a really tough time prioritizing. So, I've had this amazing goal of having a creative career, and now I want to do all the drawings, and then all the drawings are due at the same time. And who am I going to draw for? And should I do illustration for books? Should I do graphic recording? So I wrote down I'd like to improve my ability to prioritize my work when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Okay. Okay. And who would that impact if you made a drastic improvement beyond yourself?
So we have a 2-person business here, my wife and I, and she is incredibly organized, and this is one of her, I think, God-given talents. And so I think if we could do that together, that I'd have more enjoyment in my personal time because I wouldn't be thinking about the next drawing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So not only you, but it would positively impact your wife, and potentially your working and personal relationship as you guys work together in this business.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Anybody else? And again, no pressure at all. Just
I can
Nicole?
go.
open it up.
Yeah, I can share. So I've done some training with my dog, but he also has reactivity, so I need to step it up a bit and do the reactive techniques training with my dog, and something I need to really dedicate time to on a regular basis. So that's my selection. And
So-
who it will impact, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so it would impact myself, my partner, how we interact with the dog, how people who care for our dog can also interact with him, and hopefully how he reacts with other people and other dogs when we're out on walks. So hopefully just the whole experience will be easier.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. And so for you, your goal would be to actually move forward and take action on getting your dog to training. Is that
He has a car phobia, so we can't take him in the car. We just have to he's a rescue. He's got some stuff going on. But
what's your behavior that you want to change?
So my behavior is to dedicate time each day to train him. So I need to sign up for an online class so that I can facilitate it in the comfort of our own home.
Okay, so this is requiring time and energy from you on a pretty regular basis that you need to dedicate to doing that. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And one thing as we go through this, it's not going to be uncommon if you go through this, or you take other people through this where maybe they don't get it right away. And I mean, both Nicole and I think Wade's, examples were great, and you'll see whether this works for you or not. And The only people who will know will be you as you go through this. But it's not gonna be surprising if the first time you develop your commitment goal or your improvement goal, where you may not hit the mark right away either. And you may need to go, after you go through it, you might need to go back and reflect and think about it. Is that truly what you're trying to get at? So that's just something as we go through this. Okay, so as we move on to the sort of the next column, this is, this is going to be looking at behaviors that work against your goal. So these are things that you are doing or you're not doing that work against you from achieving your goal. Okay. And so here you're going to reflect and take some time. And I don't want you to list things that support your goal. Again, only behaviors that you're undertaking or that your behaviors that you're not doing that are working against you. So I'm going to give you some examples from mine. So again, my improvement goal is to get better at directly answering questions that people ask me, particularly my family, my wife and my kids, and being present when I'm being asked questions. And so the behaviors that I do while I'm at home is that I'll frequently or border on always, answer questions in an indirect or roundabout way. Right. So if it's a question, I may just sort of give this indirect answer and not directly answer, what the question is. And so when I answer questions, in an indirect way, sometimes it is because I may feel like I want to avoid conflict. Okay. Sometimes I answer questions in an indirect way to show that I'm flexible and helpful. So an example is like my wife will say to me, she'll ask me the question, do you want me to go to the store? And my response will be, well, I could go, right? Instead of saying, yes, that would be great if you could go, or I'll say like, well, I could go, without sort of directly responding, to the question. And often I will also at times like zone out and think about other things while I'm being asked questions, right? And so these are behaviors that I actively do that work against me, in wanting to, make this improvement. Okay. So again, I'm going to give you additional time to think about the behaviors that work for you or working against you. Again, these are not what other people are doing, and these are not things that are supporting you in achieving your goal, only the things that work against you. Okay. So I'm going to give you another 5 minutes to reflect on those questions. And in your own personal sheet, I want you to sort of write down as many things as you can, right? And this is where you might start to feel, you might be hitting on something if you feel a little bit uneasy. And that's a good thing. Because if you feel comfortable going through this, then you're probably not going deep enough. Okay. So, have fun with it. If you start to feel a little bit queasy as you write down these things, that's fine. That means you're going in the right direction. Okay. Is there any questions on that? Or I'm not going to send you off. Any questions on that? So what I'm going to do now is just to allow this to kind of sit in this for a little bit, is that I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms. And again, you're not compelled to share with one another. And if you don't, that's completely fine. But if you feel, if you do feel moved and you feel like you want to, share a little bit, please do. And so we'll just put you in I'm going to put you in breakout rooms just for a few minutes to talk with one another about what you guys came up with, and what are some of these things that are working against you. Okay, so just give me a minute. Okay, welcome back. Okay. Oop, welcome back. How was it? Anybody want to quick share?
Wade, give us a couple
What
thumbs up.
Couple thumbs up.
Lisa and I had a
Anybody want-
great conversation in our breakout room. Just when you dream of being a creative and you finally get there, some of the challenges that come with it that you couldn't have anticipated. And you have your dream job, and your dream job is supposed to be a dream, right? There's not supposed to be struggle. It's supposed to be awesome the whole time. And everybody's like, oh my God, you did the cool thing. And then you're doing it and you're stressed, and then you're kind of like, now what? And so
The problem is a
described
dream
our
job is
wall.
still a job.
What'd you say, Lisa?
Problem is a dream job is still a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and life is designed to have challenges. So, well, I'm good. I'm glad that you guys had a robust conversation. So I'm going to move us along. So it's like we move into column 3. So again, as I said, like, you know, in column 2, if you got your column 1 right, or you got a good goal, column 2 should begin to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Column 3 is where we go deeper. Okay. And this is where we begin to move into some maybe really uncomfortable territory. Okay. And what I was telling Brian is like, this is where the yuck factor really begins to come out. You're like, what? You're like, no, this is like not this. I don't feel good about this stuff. And so if you already began to feel that already in column 2, then I think then you're on a good path. And as we get into column 3, you know, again, we're working in the emotional domain. And so, you know, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, then that probably means that, you know, the improvement goal may not be that important to you. Okay. And so it's like if you get into column 3 and you begin to sort of really grapple with some of this, then again, you know that you're in the right direction, and that's normal. Okay. And you know, if you're not feeling that, then it may be a sign that, you know, maybe you weren't brutally honest enough with yourself as you were, you know, listing down the things in column 2. So let's move into column 3, and I'll share with, you know, what I came up with. And so the way that this works is that, you know, as we move into column 3, this is called the hidden competing commitments. Okay. And so what this asks is like, what is the worst, most uncomfortable, scary feeling that I would have if I did the opposite of what I have in column 2? Okay. So this is where, you know, we hold things in the unconscious part of our brains. And this is where we begin to potentially surface things that we may not have been really aware of in the past. Or maybe you're aware of it slightly, but you haven't given it much thought. And so again, this is where, you know, it does require reflection. But this is where things might come up. And so the way that this works is that you start out with a worry statement, right? And so so I'll use my example. So for my first one, where I frequently or always border on like answering questions in an indirect or roundabout way instead of just responding to the person, you know, it's like this yes or no. I fear or worry. So this is the way I want you to start your sentences in the 3rd column. I fear or worry that if I directly answer questions, you know, I will be wrong, or I will not know the answer, and I'll feel embarrassed and I'll feel stupid. So that's when I did my reflection, that's what came up for me. That's one of the reasons when I really thought hard about like, why am I not just answering directly? Right? When my child, you know, my daughter asks me a question, because I feel like I'll be wrong or I won't know the answer and I'll feel embarrassed and stupid. And therefore my commitment is not to feel stupid or embarrassed. Okay. That's my hidden competing commitment. Secondly, I fear or worry that if I directly answer questions, it could lead to conflict or an emotional sort of discharge in the conversation with my wife. Okay. So again, if I fear or worry that if I directly answer, this is the opposite of column 2, if I directly answer these questions, it would lead to a conflict, right? And so I have a commitment to avoiding conflict. That's my commitment. That's my hidden commitment. Third, right, is like I fear or worry that in this one, that not being flexible. So I fear or worry that not being flexible or helpful, then I'm not contributing to my family. So again, in my third example, in my column 2, I say sometimes I answer in an indirect way to show that I'm flexible and helpful, right? So it's my wife asked me, oh, do you want me to go to the store? I mean, she's referring to herself. I say, well, I can go to the store, right? I didn't tell her, it's like, no, yeah, please go to the store. That'd be great. I give this vague roundabout answer. And so I fear or worry of that, not being flexible in the way I respond, then I'm not contributing to my family. And this is an example of, like, as I thought about this, like my parents, I come from the Midwest, and in the Midwest in Wisconsin, we have like a very strong, the generalization, a strong work ethic, right? And so my parents taught me to have a very strong work ethic. So it's difficult for me to say no and not to contribute. So I have a commitment to being helpful, okay? And then the last one is like where I worry or fear that so in the last one is like I zone out and think about other things when I'm being asked questions. So when I thought about this, it's like I worry or fear that I cannot mentally handle the cumulative load of everything and all the questions that I get asked, right? So I get to have a commitment. My commitment is to not feeling overwhelmed. So I kind of zone out, and I like, things go in one ear, go over my head, okay? So that's like, as I go into your third column, I want you to frame your worry box. I fear or worry that if I do the opposite of my column 2 behavior, then this will happen. Okay. So that's the task that I want you to focus on now. If I fear or worry, if I do the opposite of what I have listed in column 2, then I think, A, B, and C will happen. Is that clear? Okay. So I'm going to give you maybe a little bit more time on this one to reflect. And I'm not going to have you go into small groups after this, but I'm going to just, we can all stay here. I'm going to put some music on and let you guys think about this, okay? Would anybody would anybody like to kind of share any reflections off of that? Now, you don't have to share like the personal things that came up for you or the person you're talking with, but sort of what did that feel like going through that?
Candace, you want to go ahead?
For sure. It's very uncomfortable. And sometimes you're aware that you have a lot of fears, but then you list them out like this, and then it makes you realize, whoa, there's maybe more fear or worry here, or those anxieties that we're not quite paying attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. No, those are all things that kind of, fear. Absolutely. It's stories we tell ourselves. And we'll come to that when we get to the last column. Anybody else?
You had a couple of comments in chat. Nicole said, amazing, like therapy. Michelle said, it's like relief and unburdening. Christina said, this is awesome. We should do this exercise annually. Just imagine how much fun that would be. I don't know.
Again,
I try not to read tone into text messages. I don't know if that was meant to be sarcastic or not.
But the point is, and so this is really like when and this is the beauty of the framework. What I found is, like, if you think about column 1 and you're in a car, it's your right foot on the gas. Like, baby, this is where we want to go. This is the direction, right? You're looking out your windshield. And then column 3 is your left foot on the brake. and it's pushing down just as hard. And so you see the direction where you want to go, but these things, these hidden competing commitments are actually holding you back. And so there's a lot of energy, right? So you have the gas going down and you have the brake going down. So you have a lot of this like this built up energy, and it's like that, you know, it's like it's your behavioral immune system, right? It's your anxiety management system. And so your anxiety management system has served you very well for many, many things and has helped each of you get as far as you've gotten in your careers. And at the same time, that same system might be holding you back from achieving the other things that you also want to achieve. Right. And until you kind of take a step and you sort of try to sort of go into this. And again, this is just the purpose of us doing this is so that you get a feeling, so that hopefully you did get that yuck factor. Hopefully you got to a place where you're like, I don't like that. Right. And that's a good thing, because you're getting into the unconscious sort of things that are buried there that you're not always thinking about. And so if you're thinking about, again, working with a client and you're trying to sort of, and they're struggling and you're trying to move them forward, you know, this is you know, a potential tool to sort of move them from the intellectual space, like, yeah, we have a problem, to like, you know, what's really going on, not just the behaviors, but column 3, the hidden commitments. So I'm going to move us into the last column, which is I think, you know, important. And so these things, as I was saying, there's kind of like the brake, the arrows are kind of like, you know, the gas pedal and the brake, and these things are kind of, you know, keep us from really sort of advancing on the things that we want to. And then so the last column is what they call big assumptions. And the whole point of this exercise, and this is, I think, really key, it's not to sort of identify them 2 behaviors and say, I'm gonna stop doing these things, or I'm gonna start doing these things. That's like immediately jumping into the technical solution to this problem, which, you know, which is all of this. Column 3 is an adaptive problem. It's about mindsets, it's about values, it's about loyalties. You know, if I think about like my third example, it's like I have a loyalty and values that are rooted in my history, my parental, my upbringing, right? These things are ingrained in sort of the way I was raised. And so, you know, that's how deep these things go, right? This isn't just sort of, you know, superficial. These are things that, you know, waters that you carry forth. Maybe it's your ethnicity, maybe it's your history, right? You know, from your ancestors, and the way you identify with things. So let's say, like, you know, these hidden commitments can be very deep and rooted, and they're very powerful. So the point of this whole exercise isn't to, again, change column 2 behaviors, but it's to sort of, it's to challenge the assumptions that we have and the truisms that we say, right? And to sort of, and so, you know, what we're aiming to do here is to identify the assumptions that we hold about our hidden commitments, right? And so, for example, for my number 1, you know, I'm committed to not feeling stupid, right? So I assume that if I cannot provide correct answer to my children and my wife, then they will not respect me. Like, that's how deep that goes, right? I assume that if I directly answer a question, then I may potentially enter into conflict. That is an assumption that I hold. That's a true thing. Now, some of these assumptions, maybe they're true, right? But oftentimes they're not going to be true. And these are the stories we tell ourselves, and this is what holds us back. Third, I assume that I will be viewed as lazy if I am not offering to help. Right? Fourth, I assume if I engage with every question that I may feel overwhelmed and not in control. And so you can kind of see how these things are linked as you read across like the screen, right? These columns are you know, they're intertwined, right? You can kind of see a pattern that emerges. And that last column, they're assumptions. Again, some of them may be true, but many of them may not be true. And so the test for you and then for your clients who you might be taking through this is not, again, not to change column 2 behaviors, but begin to test column 4 assumptions in small increments, like for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to begin to sort of, when I'm in the conversation, be more thoughtful about answering the question directly, right? So I begin to test these assumptions. And then once you begin to test your assumptions and you see that the assumptions don't hold true, or many of them don't hold true, some of them may, and that's when you begin to sort of say, okay, your aperture begins to open. Before you said like, nope, this is the way I see the world. Now all of a sudden you tested your assumption, you're like, that assumption didn't hold true. My aperture opens a little bit more. I have a little bit more leeway of sort of like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can do this more often. Okay. So that's really that's really what this whole thing is about laying out. And then so we don't have time to go into, and this is where, again, if any of this piques your interest and taps into your curiosity, I would encourage you to, to read the Immunity to Change book in its entirety, because they lay out sort of then like, well, what do you do when you get to this column 4? And kind of they give you examples of how you can kind of use that and lay out a plan to test what are good pilots to test your assumptions, right? So what Lahey would say, and even if you listen to any of her work, is that this is not something you're going to do one-off with a client. But if you have a client where you're working with them over a period of time and they buy into, your sponsor buys into like this, yeah, I have a problem, I want to fix, I want to try to do something because everything I'm doing now isn't working. And say, yes, let me take my team through this. Part of this would be sort of going through this exercise at an individual level, right? And you can do this on an individual level like we just did. But if you're also doing, if the purpose is to move a team forward, go through it at the individual level, and then you can come up with, also do it at the collective level. You can come up with a team improvement goal. What is it that we collectively want to improve? And then you can kind of go through the same exercise. But what Kagan and Lahey say is like, there's a risk of just jumping to the group exercise without actually going through this at that personal, individual level to really experience it. Experience it at the individual level first. So again, if any of this piques your interest, I would really encourage you to read their book, and they give you all kinds of templates and stuff, that you could use and pilot, with a group before you take it to a client. And so let me just end there and we can open up because we only have about 5 minutes left. So, feel free to sort of, come off mic, or open your mic and sort of, if you have any reflections, how did you feel about this? What came up for you, as we went through this? Can you envision potentially, using this, whatever comes up for you,
Lisa?
I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, I have a little question. I'm having a little difficulty distinguishing between column 3 and column 4, because
Okay.
what I'm writing in column 4 doesn't feel that much different than what I've got in column 3. Maybe I went too far in column 3 in terms of like my, feelings and assumptions and all that stuff. It's similar. They're similar. They're related, obviously.
Okay.
Can you make a
Okay.
distinction between?
So I think here is when you're setting up column 4, like if I look back at like my number 1, right, where I'm committed to sort of like not having this feeling of like being stupid or embarrassed, right? That's my hidden commitment. That's like my break. Okay, well, what's my assumption then? Right. So if my assumption is like, I need to test that. How am I going to test that? Right. What's my assumption about that commitment? And so, and all I'm doing is written or saying what I've already have written here. But like, if I assume that if I cannot provide a correct answer, then I will then they will not respect me, right? And so, you know, as far as like making a distinction, it's like really trying to sort of set up what is the assumption that you have around the commitment, okay? And then being able to sort of being able to test that and to see if it's true or not true.
So then, after this exercise is complete, then what you would then do is then challenge the assumption, correct? The final
You
assumption, is
challenge
that
the
true?
assumption,
Just said.
right?
Okay.
That's the purpose. The purpose isn't to go back to me and say, well, I just need to start, you know, changing the way I behave. No, you want the purpose is to challenge, is to set up pilots to test your assumptions. Okay. Anybody
Wade had a
else?
thought for you. Wade, did you want to bring voice to that comment?
Yeah, Craig, when I first started listening to you, your voice is so quiet, and I realized just in the last few minutes why. It's very soothing the way that you shepherd people through this, because there's no rush, there's no judgment, there's no get going. It's very, please take your time, please notice what's going on around you. And I just, the whole time I'm thinking, man, there's something about the whole thing, not just me looking at the Word document or even looking at the book, but it was your voice and the way that you guided us that really struck me. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for that. But do you, what's your, if you get on the balcony and you kind of say like, you know, big picture, like, you know, did this, what resonated or what didn't resonate for you? Like, you know, Lisa was sort of saying like my column 3, my column 4, I wasn't really able to distinguish that, you know, as much as I couldn't really make that big of a difference. You know, we didn't get into, I didn't ask you, Lisa, like, you know, what specifics you had, and we began to sort of analyze that. And if we were to do this over again, maybe we would get into that, but we don't have time. But anything else, like big picture, if you like kind of get back, like what worked or what didn't work for you guys with this?
I have an answer. I just don't want to dominate the conversation.
For Wade.
Okay. I think, Lisa, it was your comment that said a creative job is still a job. And it was just like, oh shit, you're right. You know, we've hit this place in our lives where we've always wanted to be there. And I think we expected it to be easier because we love the thing. And that was a big aha moment for me. I haven't slowed down in a while to really think about making my passion my work. And so I appreciated that comment. And then I wrote down, if I can fix this, would I be too successful? You know, if I could really balance my work, if I could prioritize, would too many good things happen? And then I'd be back to square one, where now I have too many things happening that I have to coordinate and prioritize. And so that was interesting. I was trying to figure out, why am I so nervous about that? So obviously I can't, yeah, fear of success. Thank you, Lisa. I don't think I can answer that in this moment, but that struck me and I wasn't expecting it. So I appreciated that.
Mhm. Mhm. Anybody else as we close out? We're actually a minute over, so we can.
Okay, I'm going to
Great.
go ahead and stop the recording. But before I do that, everybody, if we can give Craig a big no Scribes, thank you very much for being here and giving us that amazing method. I really appreciate you sharing it with us. Craig, what is the best way to keep in touch with you? If anybody's got some follow-up for you.
Sure, I'll just drop my email in the chat. But one, thanks, guys. You know, again, this was, I consider this a learning journey with you. And again, please, you know, if you are curious, you know, delve into it more. Delve into the Kagan and Lahey's book, and I think they even do training in some form or fashion. I'm not 100% sure, but I've just found it so powerful that I think it's worth spending the time. to sort of learn more about it.
Thanks a lot, Craig.
Okay.